Sarah Mitchell knelt in the cold dirt, her calloused hands gripping the rusty shovel handle so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The autumn wind whipped through her thin cotton dress, but she barely noticed the chill that cut through to her bones. 3 months had passed since her husband Thomas died in the logging accident, and the bank notice crumpled in her apron pocket gave her exactly 14 days to find the money for their overdue mortgage payments. The small cabin behind her looked ready to collapse under the weight of unpaid bills and broken dreams. Thomas had always promised he would strike it rich someday, maybe find gold in the hills surrounding their property in Northern California. Now, with winter approaching and her 2 young children depending on her, Sarah found herself digging frantically in every corner of their 20-acre plot. Searching for anything valuable her late husband might have hidden, she had already sold Thomas's tools, their wedding china, and even her grandmother's silver locket. The general store owner had given her a pitiful amount for items that held precious memories, but little monetary value. Mrs. Henderson, from town, had mentioned that old Indian artifacts sometimes turned up in these parts, and desperate people paid good money for such curiosities back east. Sarah knew it was a long shot, but desperation had a way of making even the most unlikely possibilities seem worth pursuing. The soil here seemed different somehow, darker and richer than the rocky ground closer to the cabin. As her shovel hit something solid, Sarah's heart jumped. She scraped away more dirt, revealing what looked like a piece of old leather. Her excitement grew as she realized it might be part of an old saddle or perhaps a treasure pouch. With renewed energy, she dug faster, ignoring the blisters forming on her palms. 20 minutes later, sweat dripped down her face despite the cool air. The leather piece turned out to be much larger than expected, and as she cleared more soil, strange symbols became visible on the surface. Sarah had never seen markings quite like these before. They looked deliberate, purposeful, unlike anything she remembered from her limited schooling. The leather felt ancient under her fingertips, thick and well-preserved despite being buried underground. As darkness began to fall, Sarah reluctantly stopped digging and covered her discovery with an old tarp. She needed more time and better light to properly excavate whatever lay beneath. That night she could barely sleep, her mind racing with possibilities. Maybe Thomas had been right about their land-holding secrets. Maybe this leather artifact was valuable enough to save their home and provide for her children. The next morning, Sarah returned to the site with borrowed lanterns and a proper pickaxe from their neighbor. She worked methodically now, carefully removing soil layer by layer. The leather piece revealed itself to be part of something much larger, something that made her hands tremble as the reality of her discovery became clear. This was not just a simple artifact or buried treasure. The careful way the leather was wrapped, the deliberate positioning in the ground suggested she had stumbled upon something far more significant and mysterious than she could have imagined. Sarah's hands shook as she pulled back the ancient leather wrapping, revealing something that made her gasp and stumble backward. Lying perfectly preserved in the makeshift grave was the body of a Native American man, his weathered face peaceful in eternal rest. But what truly shocked her to her core was the tiny bundle cradled protectively in his arms. A baby, so small and still, that Sarah's maternal instincts immediately kicked into overdrive. The man wore traditional Modoc clothing, with intricate beadwork that caught the morning sunlight filtering through the trees. His long black hair was braided with feathers and what appeared to be ceremonial ornaments. Even in death, his posture suggested he had been a person of importance, possibly a chief or respected leader. The way he held the infant spoke of deep love and protection, as if his final act had been to shield the child from some terrible fate. Sarah's mind raced as she tried to understand what she was seeing. The preservation was remarkable, almost supernatural. The cool, clay-rich soil and the leather wrapping had created perfect conditions, but something felt different about this burial. It was as if time had stood still in this small pocket of earth. The baby's tiny fingers were still wrapped around a small piece of turquoise, and both bodies seemed to emanate a strange warmth despite having been underground. As Sarah leaned closer to examine the scene, she noticed the man's chest rising and falling almost imperceptibly. Her heart nearly stopped. Was she seeing things? She reached out tentatively and felt the faintest pulse at his neck. Impossible as it seemed, this man was alive, though barely clinging to life after what must have been an incredibly long time buried alive. The baby, too, showed signs of life, a barely audible whisper of breathing that Sarah had to strain to hear. Without hesitation, Sarah began the careful process of lifting both bodies from their earthen tomb. The man was heavy, his body stiff, from being in one position for so long. But Sarah had grown strong from years of farm work. She managed to pull him onto the grass beside the excavation site, then gently took the baby from his arms. The infant felt impossibly light, like holding a bird, but definitely alive. Sarah ran to the cabin and returned with blankets, water, and milk from their cow. She had helped birth several babies in their small community, and had some knowledge of caring for the very young and very weak. The baby responded to drops of warm milk, and slowly, the man's breathing became more regular as Sarah covered him with quilts and tried to warm his body temperature back to normal. Throughout the day, Sarah worked tirelessly to care for her unexpected patients. She had completely forgotten about her financial troubles and the bank notice in her pocket. Something miraculous was happening on her land, something that challenged everything she thought she knew about life and death. As evening approached, the man's eyes flickered open for the first time, dark and intelligent, focusing on Sarah with an expression of profound gratitude mixed with confusion. The baby had begun to cry softly, a sound that filled Sarah with relief and wonder. Whatever had preserved these two lives underground was beyond her understanding, but she was determined to help them recover. Little did she know that this discovery would not only save her family's financial situation, but would also unlock secrets about her land that would change her life forever. The man tried to speak, but only whispers emerged, and Sarah realized she was about to become part of a story far more incredible than she could have ever imagined. For 3 days, Sarah tended to the mysterious man and baby in her small cabin, watching as color slowly returned to their faces and strength gradually flowed back into their bodies. The man she had rescued was clearly someone of great importance among his people. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of authority and wisdom, though he struggled with English words that seemed foreign on his tongue. "I am Chief Kinposh," he said slowly, his dark eyes studying Sarah's face with careful intensity. "My people call me Captain Jack the Child. She is my daughter, born during the great sickness that took so many of our tribe." His words came in fragments, mixed with phrases in his native Modoc language that Sarah could not understand but found strangely beautiful. Sarah learned that Chief Kinposh had been leader of a Modoc band during the terrible conflicts with white settlers decades earlier. According to his fragmented memories, a mysterious medicine man had promised to save him and his infant daughter from certain death during a particularly brutal winter when disease and warfare had decimated their people. The ritual involved a deep sleep in the earth itself, a preservation that would last until someone with a pure heart discovered them. "The medicine man said we would wake when the land found someone worthy," Chief Kinposh explained, his strength growing with each passing hour. "Someone who dug not for greed but from desperate love for family." He looked at Sarah with profound respect. "You saved us not for gold or curiosity, but because your children needed help. The spirits recognized your heart." As the chief recovered, he began to share incredible knowledge about Sarah's land. Her 20 acres sat on sacred Modoc ground, rich with history and hidden treasures that went far beyond anything she had imagined. The chief explained that his people had lived here for generations, and before the conflicts forced them away, they had hidden valuable items throughout the area to keep them safe from those who would misuse them. "Your husband knew," Chief Kinposh revealed, causing Sarah to gasp in surprise. "Thomas came to me in dreams before his death. He asked that I help his family when the time came. His spirit was good, and the land spoke to him." The chief explained that Thomas had been drawn to purchase this particular plot not just for its timber potential, but because something deeper called to him here. Over the following days, Chief Kinposh showed remarkable knowledge of the property's hidden secrets. He pointed to specific trees, rock formations, and seemingly random spots where his people had buried valuable items: silver ornaments, gold pieces obtained through trade, and precious stones that had been collected over generations. More importantly, he revealed the location of a natural spring with the purest water in the region, something that would prove incredibly valuable to the growing towns nearby. The baby, whom the chief called Little Dawn, grew stronger under Sarah's care. The infant seemed remarkably alert and intelligent for one so young, and Sarah found herself becoming deeply attached to both father and child. Her own children, initially frightened by the strangers, quickly warmed to Chief Kinpwash's gentle nature and his fascinating stories about the land they called home. As word began to spread through the small community about Sarah's unusual discovery, people became curious about the mysterious visitors staying in her cabin. Sarah carefully protected their identities, understanding instinctively that Chief Kinpwash and his daughter represented something precious that needed to be safeguarded. The chief had awakened not just to save Sarah's family, but to bridge two worlds that had been torn apart by conflict and misunderstanding. The transformation in Sarah's circumstances was already becoming apparent. The knowledge Chief Kinpwash shared about hidden valuables on her property would soon solve her immediate financial problems, but more importantly, his presence was opening doors to understanding and opportunities she never could have imagined possible. Chief Kinpwash led Sarah to a massive oak tree that stood at the far corner of her property, its thick trunk scarred by decades of weather and time. "Your husband Thomas sat beneath this tree many evenings," the chief said, placing his weathered hand against the bark. "He felt the spirit of this place but did not know how to unlock its secrets. The tree holds the first gift my people left for those who would come after." Sarah watched in amazement as the chief showed her a series of subtle markings carved into the oak's trunk, symbols that looked like natural growth patterns unless you knew exactly what to look for. Following his instructions, Sarah pressed specific marks in a particular sequence, and a section of the trunk shifted slightly, revealing a hollow space that had been perfectly concealed for decades. Inside the hidden compartment, wrapped in oiled leather, were silver coins, jewelry, and most surprisingly, official documents written in both English and Modoc symbols. The papers detailed mineral rights and water access agreements that Thomas had unknowingly inherited when he purchased the land. Chief Kinpwash explained that his people had been careful record keepers, and these documents would prove Sarah's legal ownership of valuable resources that extended far beyond her 20-acre plot. "The white man's law respects papers," Chief Kinpwash said with a slight smile. "My people understood this, so we made sure the papers would survive." The documents showed that Sarah's land included rights to a limestone quarry, timber access to over 200 acres, and most valuable of all, exclusive water rights to the spring that supplied 3 neighboring towns. Over the next week, Chief Kinpwash guided Sarah to 6 more hidden caches scattered across her property. Each location required specific knowledge to access: pressing stones in certain patterns, following underground streams to natural vaults, and understanding how the landscape itself had been modified by his people to conceal their treasures. Sarah found gold pieces, rare furs that had been perfectly preserved, and trade goods that were now worth substantial amounts to collectors and museums. The most significant discovery came when Chief Kinpwash led Sarah to what appeared to be a simple depression in the ground near the back of her property. "Here lies the real treasure," he said, and began removing stones that Sarah had walked past countless times without realizing they formed a deliberate pattern. Beneath the rocks was a natural cave system that opened into a large underground chamber. Inside the cave, Sarah discovered what amounted to a complete record of Modoc history and culture. The walls were covered with pictographs telling the stories of Chief Kinpwash's people, and the chamber contained pottery, weapons, clothing, and ceremonial items that represented decades of tribal life. Most importantly, there were additional documents detailing trade agreements and territorial boundaries that would prove invaluable to historians and government officials. "This knowledge belongs to both our peoples now," Chief Kinpwash explained. "You have proven worthy to be the guardian of our history. Use it wisely, and it will provide for your children and their children." The chief helped Sarah understand that she had become the keeper of one of the most complete Native American cultural archives in California, something that universities and museums would pay handsomely to study and preserve. As news of Sarah's discoveries began to spread through official channels, representatives from the state government and various academic institutions started arriving to assess the historical significance of her findings. The bank notice that had once threatened her family's survival was now an irrelevant piece of paper. Sarah had transformed from a destitute widow facing homelessness into the owner of one of the most valuable and historically significant properties in the region. But perhaps most importantly, Sarah understood that her role was evolving from simple property owner to cultural bridge builder. Chief Kinpwash had not awakened simply to make her wealthy, but to entrust her with preserving and sharing the rich heritage of his people. The treasures were just the beginning of a much larger responsibility that would define the rest of her life and create a lasting legacy for both her family and the Modoc people. On a misty morning 3 weeks after Chief Kinpwash's awakening, Sarah noticed an elderly Native American man walking slowly up the path to her cabin. The stranger moved with purpose despite his advanced age, and something about his presence made the air feel charged with mysterious energy. Chief Kinpwash, who had been teaching Sarah's children about Modoc traditions, suddenly stood very still and whispered, "The medicine man has come." The elderly visitor introduced himself as curly-headed doctor, the same medicine man who had performed the preservation ritual decades earlier. His appearance was both shocking and miraculous. He looked exactly as Chief Kinpwash remembered him, as if time had barely touched him at all. His long white hair was braided with sacred feathers, and his dark eyes held depths of knowledge that seemed to span centuries. "I have been waiting and watching," the medicine man explained in perfect English, his voice carrying an otherworldly quality. "The spirits told me when the time had come, when the chief and his daughter would awaken to fulfill their destiny." He studied Sarah carefully, nodding with approval. "You have done well, guardian, but the awakening is only the beginning of what must be accomplished." The medicine man revealed that Chief Kinpwash's preservation had been part of a much larger spiritual plan designed to heal the wounds between Native and white communities. The chief had been chosen not just for his leadership qualities, but because his spirit possessed the rare ability to bridge two worlds that had been torn apart by conflict and misunderstanding. Little Dawn represented the future, a new generation that would carry both worlds within her. "The land chose you, Sarah, long before your husband ever saw this place," curly-headed doctor explained. "Your ancestors had Modoc blood, though the knowledge was lost over generations. The spirits recognized the connection and guided Thomas here, then guided you to dig in exactly the right place when the time was right." This revelation explained the strange dreams Sarah had been having in her immediate connection to Chief Kinpwash and his daughter. The medicine man began teaching Sarah about her true heritage and the responsibilities that came with it. She learned that several other Modoc leaders had been preserved in similar ways throughout the region, waiting for the right circumstances to awaken and reclaim their people's rightful place in the modern world. Sarah's property was to become the center of a larger restoration effort that would reconnect scattered tribal members and preserve their culture for future generations. As word spread through Native American communities across California and Oregon, tribal members began making pilgrimages to Sarah's land. Many brought stories of their own family histories and cultural artifacts that had been hidden or lost over the decades. The underground chamber became a gathering place where elders shared traditional knowledge with younger generations who had been cut off from their heritage. The medicine man also revealed practical information that would secure Sarah's family's future permanently. He showed her additional locations where valuable minerals could be found on her land, but more importantly, he taught her how to use her newfound wealth and influence responsibly. The goal was not just personal prosperity, but creating a foundation that would support Native American education, cultural preservation, and legal rights advocacy. Chief Kinpwash awakened to serve his people one final time, curly-headed doctor said. But he also awakened to serve you and your children because your fates are now intertwined. You are family now, bound by spirit and purpose. The medicine man performed a ceremony that formally adopted Sarah and her children into the Modoc tribe, giving them not just cultural identity, but also legal standing that would prove crucial in upcoming negotiations with government officials. The transformation in Sarah's understanding of her role was profound. She was no longer just a lucky widow who had stumbled upon buried treasure. She had become the central figure in a spiritual and cultural restoration that would impact hundreds of lives. The medicine man's presence confirmed that everything happening on her land was part of a larger destiny that had been set in motion long before she was born. As government, representatives, and academic scholars continued to arrive, Sarah found herself negotiating not just for personal gain, but as an advocate for Native American rights and cultural preservation. The medicine man guided her through these complex discussions, helping her understand how to use her newfound power and wealth to create lasting positive change for both her own family and the Modoc people who had entrusted her with their most precious legacy. Sarah's small cabin became the unlikely headquarters for negotiations, that would reshape the relationship between the Modoc people and the state of California. Government officials, anthropologists, and legal experts gathered around her kitchen table, while Chief Kintpuash shared decades of suppressed tribal history and territorial claims that had been thought lost forever. The documents discovered on Sarah's land provided legal foundation for rights that had been ignored or forgotten by mainstream society. The chief's knowledge proved invaluable in resolving several long-standing land disputes throughout the region. His detailed memory of tribal boundaries, treaty agreements, and historical events provided evidence that helped other Native American families reclaim ancestral lands that had been illegally taken decades earlier. Sarah watched in amazement as her property became the catalyst for justice that extended far beyond her own circumstances. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, the lead anthropologist from the University of California, was particularly fascinated by the preservation methods that had kept Chief Kintpuash and Little Dawn alive for so many years. "This challenges everything we understand about human physiology and survival," she explained to Sarah. "The medicine man's techniques appear to have induced a state that suspended normal biological processes while maintaining cellular integrity. It's unprecedented in scientific literature." The underground chamber on Sarah's property was carefully transformed into a proper museum and research center, with the chief's guidance ensuring that every display honored Modoc traditions while educating visitors about the tribe's rich history. The facility became a model for how cultural preservation could be accomplished through cooperation between Native communities and academic institutions. Revenue from tours and research grants provided steady income that supported both Sarah's family and broader tribal initiatives. Sarah found herself appointed as the official liaison between the Modoc people and various government agencies, a role that required her to travel throughout California and Oregon, representing tribal interests. Her natural empathy and newly discovered heritage made her an effective advocate, while Chief Kintpuash's counsel helped her navigate complex political and legal challenges that would have overwhelmed someone with less guidance and support. Little Dawn, now thriving under Sarah's care, showed remarkable intelligence and seemed to naturally understand both modern American culture and traditional Modoc ways. The child became a living symbol of how two worlds could blend harmoniously, and her presence at various meetings and ceremonies helped soften tensions between groups that had been in conflict for generations. Sarah legally adopted Little Dawn, making her part of the family while respecting her Modoc heritage. The success of Sarah's cultural bridge-building efforts attracted attention from Native American tribes throughout the western United States. Delegations arrived to learn how her model could be adapted to their own situations, leading to the establishment of a network of cultural preservation centers that shared resources and strategies. Sarah's property became the informal headquarters for this growing movement. Perhaps most significantly, Sarah's work led to changes in federal policy regarding Native American cultural artifacts and burial sites. The respect and success demonstrated at her facility influenced legislation that gave tribes greater control over their ancestral remains and cultural materials. Chief Kintpuash's awakening had literally awakened broader consciousness about the rights and dignity of Native peoples. The financial security that began with discovering buried treasures had evolved into sustainable wealth through careful investment and business development. Sarah established a foundation that provided scholarships for Native American students, funded cultural preservation projects, and supported legal advocacy for tribal rights. The medicine man's guidance helped her understand that true prosperity meant creating benefits that would last for generations. As the first year of this remarkable journey came to an end, Sarah reflected on how completely her life had transformed. The desperate widow who had dug frantically in her backyard searching for anything valuable had become a respected leader in cultural preservation and social justice. Chief Kintpuash had not only saved her family from poverty but had given her a purpose that filled her days with meaning and accomplishment. The relationship between Sarah's family and the Modoc people had deepened into genuine kinship. Her biological children learned traditional skills and stories alongside Little Dawn, while tribal elders became beloved members of their extended family. The barriers between cultures that had seemed insurmountable just months earlier had dissolved into a harmonious blend that honored both heritages while creating something entirely new and beautiful. 5 years after that desperate day when Sarah first plunged her shovel into the earth behind her cabin, she stood before a gathering of over 300 people, celebrating the dedication of the Kinpwash Cultural Center. The state-of-the-art facility, built on her original 20 acres, had become the premier institution for Modoc cultural preservation and education in the entire Pacific Northwest. Sarah, now wearing traditional Modoc ceremonial dress alongside her modern business attire, represented the successful fusion of two worlds. Chief Kinpwash, his health fully restored and his wisdom sought by tribal leaders throughout the region, served as the center's spiritual director and chief historian. His presence had helped reunite Modoc families that had been scattered across multiple states, bringing together a community that many had feared was disappearing forever. The chief's daughter, Little Dawn, now a precocious 6-year-old who spoke fluent English and Modoc, had become the beloved symbol of cultural continuity and hope for the future. The impact of Sarah's discovery extended far beyond her personal transformation. The Kinpwash Cultural Center had become a model replicated by dozens of other tribes, leading to a renaissance in Native American cultural preservation across the country. The preservation techniques documented by the medicine man, curly-headed doctor, had revolutionized archaeological and anthropological research, opening new possibilities for understanding how ancient peoples survived extreme circumstances. Sarah's foundation had grown into a major force for social justice, providing over $2 million in scholarships and grants annually. The financial success had come not just from the initial treasures discovered on her land, but from wise investments guided by traditional Modoc principles of sustainability and community benefit. The limestone quarry and water rights had been developed into profitable enterprises that employed dozens of local residents while maintaining environmental responsibility. The legal precedents established through Sarah's advocacy work had fundamentally changed how Native American cultural sites were protected and managed. Her testimony before Congress had helped pass landmark legislation requiring consultation with tribal authorities before any development occurred on ancestral lands. Museums throughout the country were returning artifacts to their rightful tribal owners, following protocols developed at the Kinpwash Center. Little Dawn had grown into a remarkable child who served as a natural diplomat between cultures. Her ability to move seamlessly between modern American society and traditional Modoc ways made her a powerful advocate for understanding and cooperation. University researchers studied her development as an example of successful bicultural integration, while tribal elders saw in her the promise that their heritage would survive and thrive in contemporary society. The medicine man, curly-headed doctor, had finally begun to show his true age, but his legacy was secure through the detailed records he had helped create at the center. His knowledge of traditional healing, spiritual practices, and cultural protocols had been carefully documented and was being passed on to a new generation of tribal practitioners. The preservation rituals that had saved Chief Kinpwash and Little Dawn had been adapted to help save other aspects of Modoc culture from extinction. Sarah's own children had grown into accomplished young adults who carried both their mother's determination and their adopted Modoc heritage with pride. Her eldest son had become a lawyer specializing in Native American rights, while her daughter was studying anthropology with plans to continue the center's research programs. The family that had once faced homelessness and poverty had become a dynasty of cultural preservation and social justice. The transformation of Sarah's 20 acres into a thriving cultural and educational center had also revitalized the entire surrounding community. The town that had once struggled economically now prospered from tourism, research grants, and the jobs created by the center's various programs. Local businesses had embraced Native American themes and partnerships, creating an atmosphere of mutual respect and shared prosperity. As Sarah looked out over the celebration, she reflected on the miraculous chain of events that had begun with her desperate search for anything valuable to save her family. The treasures she had ultimately found were far more precious than gold or silver. They were the restoration of a people's heritage, the healing of historical wounds, and the creation of a legacy that would benefit generations to come. Chief Kinpwash approached Sarah during the ceremony, Little Dawn holding both their hands as they stood together watching traditional dancers perform on the same ground where Sarah had once dug frantically for survival. The spirits knew, the chief said quietly. They knew that sometimes the greatest treasures are found not by those who seek wealth, but by those who dig from love and desperation for their families. You saved us, but in saving us, you saved yourself and created something beautiful that will last forever. The destitute widow who had once faced losing everything had become the guardian of a cultural renaissance that bridged ancient wisdom with modern opportunities, proving that sometimes the most remarkable discoveries come to those who need them most and use them best.